Amanda from Langmaster Learning System. Have you ever heard the story called Hansel and Gretel? Well, this was a very famous fairy tale, and it's also the story that I want to share with you. Let's begin. Once upon a time, there was a poor woodcutter who lived with his wife and his 2 children, living by the side of a great forest. His children were Hansel and Gretel. The family was so poor that the father couldn't even purchase any bread at all. As he dreadfully thought about this, he groaned and said to his wife, "What is to become of us? How are we to feed our poor children when we no longer have anything even for ourselves?" The wife said, "Early tomorrow morning, we will take the children out into the forest. There, we will light a fire for them and give each of them 1 more piece of bread. And then we will go to our work and leave them alone." "No, wife," said the man, "I will not do that. How can I bear to leave my children alone in the forest?" The wife continued, "Oh, you fool! Then we must all 4 die of hunger." She then left him no peace until he consented. The hunger made the 2 children awaken, and they could hear all the conversation. Gretel wept bitter tears and said to Hansel, "Now all is over with us." "Be quiet, Gretel," said Hansel. "Do not distress yourself. I will soon find a way to help us." When day dawned, but before the sun had risen, the stepmother awoke the 2 children. She said, "Get up, you sluggards! We are going into the forest to fetch wood." Then they all set out together on the way to the forest. Hansel and Gretel were each given a piece of bread to eat. When they had walked a short time, Hansel had been dropping white pebble stones out of his pocket on the road as a trail. When they had reached the middle of the forest, the father said, "Now, children, pile up some wood, and I will light a fire so that you are not cold." After he lit the fire, the man and his wife left the children. Hansel and Gretel sat by the fire, and when noon came, they fell fast asleep. And when the full moon had risen, Hansel took his little sister by the hand and followed the pebbles which he left throughout the way. Then they finally found the way back to their house. Not long afterwards, the family ran out of reserved foods. The man's heart was heavy, but still he agreed to leave his children in the forest for a second time. The children, once again, had heard the conversation. At midnight, Hansel again got up and wanted to go out and pick up pebbles to mark the way back home. But the stepmother had locked the door, so Hansel could not go out. Early in the morning came the woman and took the children out of their beds. Their piece of bread was given to them, but it was smaller than the time before. On the way into the forest, Hansel crumbled his bread in his pocket. He threw all the crumbs on the path. Then the children were left in the forest a second time. When the moon came, Hansel and Gretel began to follow the crumbs, but they found no crumbs, for the many thousands of birds which fly about in the woods had picked them all up. They were very hungry, for they had nothing to eat but 2 or 3 berries, which grew on the ground. When it was midday, they saw a beautiful snow-white bird sitting on a bough. It spread its wings and flew away before them, and they followed it until they reached a little house. When they approached the little house, they saw that it was built of bread and covered with cakes, and that the windows were made of clear sugar. Due to their hunger, the 2 children started eating different parts of the house. Then a soft voice cried from the parlor, "Nibble, nibble, gnaw. Who is nibbling at my little house?" The children answered, "The wind, the wind, the heaven-born wind," and went on eating without disturbing themselves. Suddenly, the door opened, and a woman as old as the hills, who supported herself on crutches, came creeping out. Hansel and Gretel were so terribly frightened. The old woman, however, nodded her head and said, "Oh, you dear children, who has brought you here? Do come in and stay with me. No harm shall happen to you." She led them into her little house. Good food was set before them, including milk and pancakes, with sugar, apples, and nuts. Afterwards, 2 pretty little beds were covered with clean white linen. Hansel and Gretel lay down in them, and they thought they were in heaven. However, the old woman had only pretended to be so kind, when she was in fact a wicked witch. When a child came to this house, she would cook and eat the child. The woman locked Hansel in behind a grated door. Then she forced Gretel to cook meals for her brother, so the witch could soon eat him. When 4 weeks had gone by, and Hansel still remained thin, she was seized with impatience and decided that she would not wait any longer. She decided to cook Hansel. Early in the morning, the witch pushed poor Gretel near to the oven. "Creep in," said the witch. She also told Gretel, "See if it is properly heated, so that we can put more bread in." Gretel said, "I do not know. How do I get in?" "Silly goose," said the old woman. "The door is big enough. Just look, I can get in myself." And she crept up and pushed the witch into the oven. Then Gretel shut the iron door. Gretel found Hansel and cried, "Hansel, we are saved." Then they went into the witch's house, and they saw in every corner there stood chests full of pearls and jewels. They took some jewelry and then began to run and came back to their house. The man was very miserable, since he had left the children in the forest and still regretted it a lot. He hugged the 2 children and was glad that they could come back. Then all anxiety was at an end, and they lived together in perfect happiness. The end. I hope you enjoyed the story. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment below on what you want to learn next. See you next time.